Okay, I've kind of made enough points for now. Let's move on a little bit. I started researching this not fucking around group through various sources. This was just the RT article kind of contained the most information in one place. I mean, leave it to the media to mischaracterize things. In this case, you'd probably expect the media to err on the side of making them look nicer, not as bad. Whereas if they were covering, like a 3%er or some other kind of militia group, they'd probably paint it in a bad light. That's just me trying to filter all of my media sources through some kind of bias check. But even this article says there are some pretty serious aspects to this not fucking around coalition that are worth talking through, because a lot of voluntarists are saying a lot of the same things and wishing for a lot of the same things. And so we can't just make a blanket statement that these guys got it wrong. It's worth actually taking their points and what they're wanting and what they're trying to achieve piece by piece and giving credit where it's due and calling out obvious problems where we see them. Isn't RT Russian-controlled media? Yeah, I believe it is. So again, let's take all of our media with the bias that's probably inherent in it, and evaluate things for yourself for sure. This was just the most information-rich post. So, leader of Radical Black-Only Militia, Not Fucking Around Coalition. I mean, the name, come on. That's a cool name. I like that. Believes in violence and wants a real-life Wakanda for every black person in America. So, right off the bat, the quotes that this guy is giving the media is 180 degrees off from anything anybody that I know leading marches would have ever said. You don't want people to see you as the aggressor. Well, for us, it's because we never want to be the aggressor, first of all. So it's important that we curate the public appearance that matches our principles, that we never want to be that aggressor. Well, let's get into it. Let's see. NFAC, masked armed black militia that recently marched through a park in Georgia, deems violence and killing an acceptable response to oppression. Their end goal is to break away from the U.S. as their own black-only nation. The NFAC grabbed plenty of attention on social media with a high-profile public debut on July 4th, the sight of an all-black militia clutching rifles and handguns marching in the heartland of the Ku Klux Klan at Stone Mountain caused plenty of ripples. Racism is pretty rare on the scale of the country, but it certainly exists in certain hot spots. And, I have to at least give them props for staging this where the racists actually are, instead of in some random big city where almost no one is actively racist. They actually went to where the racists are to, make a point. I like that. I can at least appreciate that. You're not like going into some normal big city and insinuating that the normal people there are racist. You're actually going to where the racists are. I think that's prop worthy. I don't know what keeps getting unplugged from Windows, but hopefully that sound stops. But very little is known about them despite a frenzy of speculation. It's not even clear when they were created or how many of them there are. So to make their intentions clear, NFAC founder and leader Grand Master J, real name John Fitzgerald Johnson, spoke exclusively to RT. That might be why this article has more information than others, if he only spoke with them. Kurt B says, I see where this is going and thank you. I'm not even sure where it's going, so maybe you see where it's going better than me. Mind if I squanch says, I think nice name, by the way. I think he legit wants a race war. Maybe. There is a misconception. Let's see. I don't like reading these subquotes. We are here to protect the black community, as that's who is under attack. Nobody is protecting black children. This is a quote from the leader. Nobody is protecting black children, men and women in America. What necessitated the creation of the NFAC was the need to address a rising tide of police brutality, of racial brutality, of unfairness in the judicial system, he said. Most of us, like me, are ex-military. We're not young people on the block. We're voters. We're your responsible guys. We're the guys with good jobs. While seeing, end quote. While seeing themselves as protectors, Jay has a clear aim of what he wants to achieve, and he's not playing it small. He feels that black people need to be split from the rest of the U.S. So he says he and others are filing an order of liberation with the International Court of Justice. He explained, quote, I want them to declare every black person who is a descendant of the Portuguese slave trade a political prisoner of the United States, and to sanction the United States to do one of two things. The first is give us our own land here so we can go in, set up our own government, and the whole 9 yards. End quote. Some have speculated that Jay is demanding the state of Texas as this land, but he only used the Lone Star State as an example. The key is to be given land no longer controlled by the White House. The other option is more radical, which most media have refused to publish. Jay revealed, quote, it's a glaring fact that mainstream media in the United States has completely ignored the NFAC. ABC, I'm not sure that that's at all true. ABC News tried to do an interview with me, but found the information too scary, so they buried the story as a history piece about Stone Mountain. Quote, the mainstream media will not report on us as images of organized black folks with guns would send shivers down the spine of the racist core of America. Yeah, except most media, end quote. Yeah, except most media, mainstream media especially, is controlled by lefties who espouse anti-racism as their every waking breath. So this is not true. This is trying to paint the narrative in a specific way that paints them as a victim, which is a common theme among many people sort of on the left. Black-only exodus to Africa. Quote, my other aim is for an exodus to Africa, to establish our destiny and build our own nation and get a seat at the UN like everybody else. 45 million of us is a nation within a nation, so we can take ourselves to a place where two countries friendly to us are willing to carve out some land. That would be in Africa, as it's where we come from. Where we have greater numbers, where resources are, and I already have relationships with some of the rulers of those countries. Hypothetically, I want to get an area of about 100 miles on each side, declare it a sovereign zone, and build an infrastructure. End quote. There is collectivism everywhere in this. Build our own nation. 45 million of us is a nation within a nation, he says. I mean, he's literally, I'm assuming 45 million is the number of black people in the United States. I doubt a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of those people would want to move to Africa. So this is the danger of collectivizing language. He is speaking for a group that is collectivized around the adjective that is race or skin color. And he's speaking as if he speaks for 45 million people, which is patently and utterly absurd. And it also has a more manipulative quality to it. When you use collective language around groups of people, around adjectives that are non-chosen or involuntarily accepted attributes. And what I mean by that is, like, it's one thing to say my poker club. The poker community of such and such establishment or such and such bar, those are people that voluntarily sort of associate with a group of people that play poker at a specific location. That's a chosen sort of attribute. Or even like a collectivism around, let's say snowboarders, right? These are people that choose to learn how to snowboard and participate in that sport. And so when somebody uses collectivizing language around that adjective, I mean, it's still mostly invalid, because once you get over like 5 or 10 people, there's almost nothing you can say about all of those people that would apply to all of them, or even most of them. But it's still even more valid and less manipulative than when you use collectivism or collectivizing language around an adjective or an attribute that people do not choose. So it is a fact of birth that you and I had absolutely nothing to do with, that we are whatever skin color or whatever race that we are. And so there is a subtextual level of manipulation involved in using collectivized language around those types of attributes. Because if you have a guy like this, let's say, that, you know, is obviously is a strong leader, a strong black leader, he's leading a community of people, he's he says he's espousing that he's fighting for black rights and the rights of black people and to protect black people. Not those specific black people, but black people as a 45 million individual collective. When he speaks for the collective called black people, the manipulation is not on as much on the listener that he's hearing him speak for that collective. The manipulation is on the individuals in that collective that dissent, that don't agree, that he does not speak for. Because it puts them in a subconscious, like if you're aware of this, then it doesn't really have an effect, but I don't think most people are aware of this. This is just how humans work subconsciously. But what it does subconsciously is it makes you choose between your race and a fact of existence that you can't change. You don't think about this, it's subconscious. It makes you choose between a fact that you cannot change, which is also your identity in the world, and whatever claim this guy is making representing you, your collective. So it pits you against yourself. Either you agree with him or appreciate his leadership or whatever, or you're rejecting your collective, you're rejecting your attribute, which in this case is something that you had nothing to do with, you didn't choose it. It's just part of your existence, part of who you are, part of your physiology and existence in the world. That's manipulative and borderline evil. And so anytime I see people using collective language, especially around attributes that people don't choose, that is a mega sign of manipulation for me. And that is a lot of what this guy does in almost every sentence. So we can take ourselves to a place where 2 countries friendly to us are willing to carve out some land. That would be in Africa, as it's where we come from, where we have greater numbers, where resources are, and I already have relationships, blah, blah, blah. He wants to build a sovereign zone and build infrastructure. Now, a lot of voluntarists, this is a strategy that they're into. And it's kind of a cool idea. Not, again, well, this guy is, let me be clear. This guy specifically is wanting to create an area for like-skinned people, for people of his race exclusively. This is an unchosen attribute. A lot of voluntarists are trying to create a location where other voluntarists, people that are of like mind on this chosen attribute called voluntarist, people that understand this core principle, could live free of control, like what this guy says. He wants it to be a sovereign zone. He wants it to have its own infrastructure, and he wants it to be free of control by the White House, I think is one of the things he said in here. A lot of people would love for to be able to, write a letter to some UN governing body demanding, 100 square miles of land where they could go and make their own rules and live sort of free. because if nothing else, good or bad, and again I think the racial nationalism is a big red flag and a big problem. No matter what race is calling for the nationalism, that's a problem. But we can at least recognize and identify that he is, in a pretty clear way, rejecting or withdrawing the consent of the governed. And in fact, later you'll see that he basically says it straight out that, well, we'll get to it. Quote, if something happens to a Chinese person in America, China gets upset. If it's British person, the Queen has something to say about it. The color black is not a country. So if something happens to a black person in America, nobody gets upset. The riots that broke out after the latest resident police killing of an unarmed black man, George Floyd, is apparently not what he has in mind. He wants to take things global. Quote, we have no identity. They call us African Americans, but tell me where in Africa. There are 55 countries in Africa. If we have our own country, then if something happens in America, we can go to the UN and say that's a violation. End quote. Then something says, RT reporter says, those with a single black parent could be included in their group, but would be investigated by the NFAC along with their, quote, pattern of behavior. Which is a questionable statement for sure. Voluntary Dan says, first time he saw me, he thought I looked like a skunk. Yeah, it's kind of skunk-light. You know, I appreciate skunk better than Guy Fieri. Like, Guy Fieri is just like white and spiky all over. I mean, I wish I could cook like that guy, but I don't think that's quite the hair. So, NFAC hasn't been spawned by the Black Lives Matter movement. Jay, the leader, was part of BLM several years ago, but grew frustrated by their direction. He feels a more authoritarian approach is the only way forward. Quote, Black Lives Matter does not represent the sentiments of the black community. We have distanced ourselves from them completely. BLM doesn't believe in violence. We do. Let me read that again. BLM doesn't believe in violence. We do. We chose America's Independence Day to send that message as we were slaves when that happened. We were not members of this country. We tried to be here for 247 years. We had Reconstruction and they burned our towns down. We had Jim Crow when they set dogs on us and told us we couldn't sit next to them. We tried that with affirmative action and they rolled that back. It's obvious they don't want us here. Now, this is where the sort of collectivizing language becomes absurd. Not only does he collectivize the victimhood of a bunch of people that aren't even alive today, and sort of ties himself to them as a victim, but he also collectivizes the culpability of the aggressors that no longer exist on the planet and ties them to, and their crimes to people that are alive today that had nothing to do with it and would not consent to it given the choice today. This collectivizing over unchosen attributes, over time and space, is a huge red flag. It's a huge problem. It's a huge danger to polite society, towards ethics in general. Ethics do not function on collectives. Ethics function exclusively at the individual level because individuals are the only ones that act. Collectives do not act. There is no collective is a concept that just collectivizes a group of individuals. The individuals act. Even if the individuals act together, it's still individuals acting, and it's still those individuals that are culpable. You can't hold a collective culpable. A collective is a concept. A concept can't provide restitution or be, defended against. It's just a concept. It only exists in people's heads. BLM doesn't believe in violence. We do. Let me just read these statements again. Black Lives Matter does not. Not that one. BLM doesn't believe in violence. We do. We chose America's Independence Day to send that message as we were slaves, as we were slaves when that happened. We, talking about the people in his group that are currently existing, chose Independence Day to send that message as we were slaves when that happened. We were not members of this country. His we includes millions of people that are dead and do not exist. as well as himself. So he's including himself in a we of people that existed hundreds of years ago. Now, granted, no one, almost no one, a tiny fraction of a percent of people that existed back then, and you, speaking of audiobooks, Lysander Spooner's No Treason Constitution of No Authority makes this case very clear, and it's fresh on my mind because I'm reading it, that only a tiny minority of people had anything to do or even had the opportunity to consent or disconsent to the Constitution. Slaves obviously didn't get a say. Women didn't get a say. And a little known fact is that non-property owning men most of the time or many times didn't even get a say. So it was a tiny fraction of the people that even got to consent to the Constitution. That's not a racial issue. That's not even a gender, sexual issue, sex issue. That is just a fact of the flaw of, that's just the non-consent of the Constitution. Most people were not members of this country, did not get a say when that happened. Then he says, we tried to be here for 247 years. We tried to be here for 247 years. Not only is he literally speaking for the 40 million some odd black people that are alive today in this country, but he is speaking for every black person that has ever lived in this country. And all of the dead ones. We had Reconstruction and they burned our towns down. They burned our towns down. Who's they? Is he including anybody alive today in that culpability for that crime? I'm pretty sure in his mind, yes. We had Jim Crow when they set dogs on us and told us, and when they set dogs on us and told us we couldn't sit next to them. We tried that with affirmative action and they rolled that back. This is that victim-aggressor narrative, but it's collectivized over a bunch of people that are alive today that had absolutely nothing to do with any of it. He says, if anybody in our group has a personal agenda and just wants to shoot some people, then we're not the group for them. But on July 4, before we went to the park, my orders were kill them. Not shoot or wound them. Kill them. That was the safety briefing. I told them we were not to initiate anything, but if they attack us, then everyone out here will kill everyone in sight. We don't want to hear your excuses anymore. We don't want to hear let's talk or wait for the grand jury. I mean, I'm always about self-defense, but when you're leading an event of this size with this many weapons involved, you probably don't want to be telling a bunch of people to kill everyone in sight. Everyone in sight conceptually would definitely include innocent people that had nothing to do with whatever you were responding to. Okay. Then he was talking about how he lets members in. There's a vetting process. We inspect them. They get sworn in. We're also a coalition of some other existing organizations that want to be a part of it. They vet their members too. We learned our lesson from types of infiltration methodologies. That's why we're so secretive about our numbers. Basically they only let black people in. And he basically justifies that by saying that other groups get to have their race-based associations, so we can too. Okay, so you've got a sizable militia of people that one of which made a boo-boo at your event. A pretty bad boo-boo. Not just like, ooh, I accidentally shot a hole in the ground, embarrassing boo-boo that had that happen to any of the marches that we've been involved with would have been international news for weeks. Not only did they, it wasn't just putting a hole in the ground, it was putting a hole in 3 people. 3 of your own participants. And I think that fact has hardly been a blip on the radar, which goes exactly the opposite of the claims this guy was making about the media ignoring them.